Today, the 8 richest human beings in the world, 8 individuals, their combined wealth now equals the accumulated wealth of 1/2 the human beings living on Earth. That's 3.5 billion people. There's something very dysfunctional about the way we're organizing the economic life of the human family.
Welcome to SkysTribe, and today we're going to dive deep into something that's very important that you should know about because it does affect you, even if you think that you don't understand anything. But the whole reason everybody thinks that they don't understand is because since birth we've been told not to care about finance, and there's a reason for that. You can do some digging on your own because that's a whole nother video. We need to understand what the hell is going on, not just in the United States, but around the globe. Inflation, recession, keep hearing hyperinflation, all these words. Most common people don't know what the hell that means. We don't know what the hell they're talking about because we think it doesn't affect us. The truth is that it's been affecting us since the 80s. Inflation is like a sniper. It's silent but deadly. You don't see it coming. You just feel it. That's inflation. And all the leaders around the globe, they keep pointing fingers at people or things as culprit. First, it was COVID, and then it was billionaires, and then it was Russia. There's always somebody to blame. And, mainstream media, they do this like psyops where if they repeat it long enough, people start believing that shit because people are too lazy to think for themselves. They don't do any critical thinking whatsoever. They don't go dig into all this. That's why now you got a whole bunch of people out there doing fact checks, because half of the time when these people go on TV, they're lying to you.
America's better positioned to lead the world than we ever have been. We have the strongest economy in the world. Our inflation rates are lower than other nations in the world.
Okay, quick fact check there for the big guy. The U.S. inflation rate is now 8.3%, which is higher than all the G7 nations that you said that in front of. So the question is, why does he keep lying to us about this strong economy? Biden and the Fed chair have been declaring how great our economy is, well positioned. We're in the midst of a recession.
The numbers are all messed up. Biden keeps saying that our economy is doing great. The deficit is down. Are you kidding me? We're almost at 30 trillion in debt. Unemployment is not down. The numbers that he's talking about, is people getting second jobs because the first job is not enough for them to maintain themselves and their family. The CPI numbers that they keep talking about is the consumer price index, which, here you go.
That you're using the methodology that the government used to use before they've made an adjustment. Can you explain how that works?
Sure. Back in the early 1980s, the federal government decided that it was going to change the way the consumer price index is calculated because inflation was rising more rapidly than they wanted to see, and it meant that they had to have higher cost of living adjustments in the year ahead for people on Social Security, with the effect that if they could somehow bring down the reported CPI, it would reduce the cost of living adjustments they would have to make. I took offense at that because the whole concept of the consumer price index was to measure constant standard of living and to give people an honest adjustment to their Social Security payments or anything else that the government paid out. So when they started changing it, and before 1980, it was pretty stable. The biggest change was the housing, and where there had been a component in the housing cost reflecting the cost of owning your own home, they changed that to the concept of a homeowner's equivalent rent, where the government would estimate how much it cost you to rent your own house. And then the monthly inflation rate was determined by how much the government determined that the homeowner would raise his rental rate on himself. Completely nonsense number, but it had the effect of knocking something like 1.5 percentage points off aggregate CPI. And there were other changes made after that into the early 2000s.
You're welcome. Inflation is when you have too much money circulating. And how did we get too much money circulating? Well, the Federal Reserve. That's the central bank of the United States.
A situation like this is going to end relatively badly. Some less badly, some more. But you can't keep printing up money and printing it up and printing it up because you get what you have now that you can't control. The government can't control inflation.
I hope that you know something about what's happening with our economy because I'm assuming you're watching this channel because, you're kind of keeping up with finance. If you don't, I'm going to put up here some pictures for you so that maybe, you could read them and get a little more educated.
If we're already in a recession with low unemployment, imagine how much worse this recession is going to get when employers start reacting to the recession by laying off their workers in mass, and as the Fed continues to raise interest rates and as inflation continues to drive consumer prices higher. The reason we have so much debt is because we were in such a low interest rate environment for so long, thanks to the Fed. Obviously, with all the debt that we have, nobody, including the federal government, can afford to service the debt. But we're not going to get a hold of inflation until we cut government spending. We've got to get rid of these deficits that the Fed is monetizing. And nobody in the Biden administration is talking about reducing government spending. In fact, all their plans are to spend even more money when they're supposedly complaining about inflation. Inflation is the tax that we're paying to finance all their spending.
CPI, raising rates. Raising rates means when you want to go buy a car, you want to go get a credit card, you want to go buy a home, you got to take out a loan. And most likely it's going to be a bank. And the bank will give you that loan depending on your credit score. But they're going to do it with a little thing attached to it. And that's going to be the interest rate that they're going to charge you. So people that have bad credit, they get 18, 22% interest. Every single historical crash, recession, depression that we've had is because of the banks. You know, we had presidents. We had Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson. We had John Kennedy. We had Lincoln. We had so many presidents that were not even cool with the banks. Like Jackson even shut them down. There was 2 attempts to assassinate him, and this guy's so gangster. Clearly they didn't, but the guy that tried to, I mean, Jackson like ground and pound UFC style, like almost beat the man to death after being shot twice. These bankers, they don't play. They're like the puppet masters, man. They're pulling the strings. You know, if you know anything about our history as a country, we left Europe. We tried to start fresh and we escaped England. But guess what? That Bank of England sent its spies and they infiltrated our newly colonized USA.
The magnanimously titled Bank of England is created. The name is a carefully constructed lie, designed to make the bank appear to be a government entity. But it is not. It is a private bank owned by private shareholders for their private profit, with a charter from the king that allows them to print the public's money out of thin air and lend it to the crown. What happens here at the birth of the Bank of England in 1694 is the creation of a template that will be repeated in country after country around the world. A privately controlled central bank lending money to the government at interest, money that it prints out of nothing. And the jewel in the crown for the international bankers that creates this system is the future economic powerhouse of the world, the United States.
There's a reason why the redcoats were coming. Remember, burning boats, the tea tax. Tired of the government and the banks taking advantage. Our forefathers sat down and put the Constitution together. They knew about these people. The banks over there, the Bank of England was the first bank with the central bankers were more powerful than the government. And they saw opportunity in America, and the Rothschilds sent their cousins, their nephews. They sent the whole tribe down. Like, yo, go set up shop. And if you do some digging, you'll find out nothing I'm saying to you is a lie. Like, I'm putting up pictures so that you can see this is legit. It deals with governments that allow them to exist by telling them we're going to print money from thin air and then we're going to let you borrow it. Why would I want to pay you for something that is just made out of thin air and it has no value? Now, at the time, back in the day, there was gold. Now it's just a piece of paper. It's not even backed by gold. We went off the gold standard because we got too greedy and we overspent, and then we couldn't pay the gold back. We have no gold.
We don't. The Federal Reserve does not own any gold at all. We have not owned gold since 1934.
And our deficit right now is almost at 30 trillion. Do you know what happens to governments that default on their debt? Look at Greece. Look at Sri Lanka right now. The people are rising. They're protesting. They are fighting back. It's all corrupt, man. The ones at the top, they're chilling. But the little people at the bottom, they're the ones that are suffering. Look around what's happening in the world. Sri Lanka is over here. You know, I'm in Asia, so I hear a lot about what's happening around here. But these people, they done ran up in the president's house. They had a pool party. Then they burned the palace down. And that was in Sri Lanka. You got to see what's happening in Venezuela. We all know, not just Venezuela. You got protests in France. You got protests in Netherlands. You got South America, Panama. You got Pakistan. You got Israel. You got people protesting right now in Iran because of inflation. Inflation is running rampant around the globe. These numbers that they're telling us, oh, it's 9%. It's not double digits, but maybe it will get there. They're lying. They're lying because Back in the 80s and the 70s, there was an old way that didn't change, and that's how they used those CPI, the consumer price index numbers. They didn't change the goods that were in that basket where they, figure out how much inflation is. They are manipulating the numbers. It is far worse than what they're saying. And I got this little clip for you.
The Federal Reserve is America's central bank.
The job of the Federal Reserve is to safeguard the buying power of the dollar and to make interest rate policy in the public interest. They're supposed to minimize inflation, maximize employment.
It does this by working with retail banks that Americans use. Think Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, etc.
Banks have an account at the Fed the way you have an account at a bank, and the Fed takes that money and invests it in treasury bills, mortgage-backed securities, and pays the bank a little bit of interest.
The Fed manages the U.S. money supply. Their decisions can have a large economic impact, but some believe that Congress's actions within the economy are much more important.
The Federal Reserve needs to be reformed. The Federal Reserve needs individuals who are on the receiving end of monetary policy, not individuals who are only PhDs in economics who've never held a job in the real world and have a pension for life and are not affected by zero interest rate policy making life more difficult for savers who don't have a public pension for life.
Our monetary policy, it is corrupt, it's broke. The thing is, these bankers, they're too powerful now. They've been riding the wave since England, since before America was discovered. And now we're paying the price, but it's all dominoes. If you look back, every single crash that we've had, it's the fault of the banks. The 1929 Great Depression happened because of the banks. World War I started it all because the government needed money. So they started selling people these government bonds, and they would reward them with a little interest. People started buying them up, but you know what? Banker, Citibank, he came up with a great idea. It's like, you know what? If people want to buy bonds, then, let's get them into all kinds of stocks. Let's get us some influencers. History repeats itself. It doesn't rhyme. It repeats itself. And I'm going to show you. Look at all the things that are happening today that are just like right before the Great Depression. You got too much money on Robinhood and Wall Street bets and GameStop. That's what they said. It was the stimmy checks, right? Little Jimmy and his $500 stimmy. That's exactly how it started. Banks saw that people had money and they wanted that money. These bankers were like, yo, let's get some famous people to make it look cool, buy some stocks, speculate, gamble. And sure enough, they did it. And then when they couldn't make enough money by just having people buy stocks, they came up with brokers. Brokers is what you use when you don't know shit about investing. You just give your money to a professional. But of course, they take a commission fee. Remember Wolf of Wall Street? Yeah, but guess what? Being a broker was not good enough for the banks. They needed more money because motherfuckers is greedy. They came up with this awesome concept. People don't have money now, but they could pay later, and we can let them borrow stocks from other people. And here is where leverage trading was born. You keep hearing about people being liquidated when they short or when they long. They're using 5x, 10x. They're borrowing stocks from other people, they're selling them and trying to make a profit on the difference, whether it goes up or it goes down. Yeah, that was the bankers right before the Great Depression in 1929. Listen, the bankers came up with more creative ways to get you to spend your money and get more indebted because it fills their pockets. That's when 2019 happened and COVID happened. That was the greatest wealth transfer of the world. Yeah, the billionaires. Anybody knows how the hell that happened? The common folk, they live paycheck to paycheck. Most of them don't even have savings. They can't really invest or have any kind of assets that hold value. When inflation hits, people that have money in the bank are losing buying power. The super rich, they don't lose anything. They get richer. You know how they do it? Because they have assets. Their money's not sitting in a bank losing valuation. Land, properties, art, anything that holds value over time is what they have. When inflation happens, those things actually increase in value because smart money knows that the dollar weakens, it loses its purchasing power. So what they're gonna do is gonna start to buy more assets to hedge against inflation. I'm gonna make another video and I'm gonna show you everything that's happening right now already happened. And I will prove it to you in the next video because this video is way too freaking long right now. But we're gonna talk about it later.